Happy Monday, and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. I'm Michelle Pache, and I'm here today with Dr. Ryce and Tim Hayes. We warmly welcome you to the show, and thank you for choosing to be with us. Today is June 2nd, 2014. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk with Dr. Ryce. We encourage you to call in with your comments or questions, allowing you to actively strengthen and deepen your practice. So now let's welcome Tim in the process of learning and experiencing forgiveness.
Thank you, Michelle. Is Dr. Ryce on yet?
I am.
I can hear you, sir.
Well, hello, Dr. Michael Ryce.
Hey there, good sir. How do you be?
I'm doing beautifully well, thank you. I'm glad you were able to get on. I understand you have no internet where you're having lunch with Jeanie, and our best to Jeanie on her eternal day here.
Yes, it is her eternal day, and this was our starting point. If you look on Facebook, we posted some pictures, actually. It's an awesome restaurant here in Asheville, North Carolina, where they literally go out into the garden behind the restaurant and pick the food and bring it in and serve it to you fresh. So put a bunch of pictures on. They recycle, they compost, all that sort of stuff. So there's some fun pictures on the Why Is This Happening to Me Again page. And if folks want to jump on there and have a look at where we are. And we actually just did a planning session with Dale Allen Hoffman. His wife and his daughter were with us. And tonight, our workshop, we did our first workshop in the series here in Asheville yesterday, 4-hour Why Is This Happening to Me Again. And tonight, Dale and I are going to do our first thing on Aramaicisms, which is a word I coined to represent some of the key concepts and key words in the Aramaic that have been mistranslated and led people down a path of, what should I say, a lot of insanity where the insanity was never intended or meant in the original translation. So, saying that's in the Asheville, North Carolina area. Tonight, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll be doing a series of free workshops. Tomorrow night, we're doing healing through relationships, and then communication. Did you hear what I think I said on Wednesday? And Thursday is codependence to interdependence. So, anybody that's in the Asheville, North Carolina area, we'd be delighted if you come and join us with us. Absolutely awesome facility that we're speaking at. But it used to be called the Secret Garden, and it's just this fabulous house with gardens and pools, and it's just really pretty cool. So, and we're enjoying North Carolina. It's nice to have landed on the East Coast and ready to rock and roll. So what's on your mind for today, Dr. Tim?
Well, this morning I was scrolling through old things, listening or looking for what I wanted to listen to, and I found, I think it's a talk you did in Hawaii, where you were giving an intro on a Sunday to a week of workshops you'd be doing, and you were talking about on the turn of a phrase or the turn of a word. Right. And you read something about the misinterpretation of a word that led to the dropping of the bomb.
Yes. Yeah.
And that intro, I think, is one of the best summaries and overviews or intros to your work, that, to my ear anyway, that I've ever heard. And just the way it was flowing and came together. And
so was this on a video on our website? Was it a video at Unity in Diamond Head?
Well, I don't think it's that one. I think it's, I remember that one. That was a very good one also. That one was Coin of the Realm, right?
Yes, yes.
And so I don't think it's that one. I think this is, maybe it wasn't Hawaii, but you remember where you were reading about the general who used a word that could mean reserve judgment, or it could also mean ignore, and the Japanese press decided to interpret it as the word ignore.
the warmongers wanted war, and so they got the wish. Praise against the true. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember now. It's been a while since I've looked at that material. Trying to remember what that word is. It's just right on the tip of my tongue. Refresh me.
Yeah, I wish I could remember it, but I was listening to that this morning and was quite moved, and just reminded me of the importance of clarifying. And this is ostensibly our Parent-Teacher Monday, and I think I heard from you that Suzanne won't be able to join us.
Suzanne won't be here, but Julie's here, and we're going to pick up the conversation where we left it 2 weeks ago before Memorial Day.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about how that lecture really fits in here, because if we're just assuming that we know what someone means when they say a phrase or say a certain word, we're leaving ourselves open to horrible miscommunications and potentially disastrous consequences. And it's critically important in our relationships, especially if we're parenting or teaching, to be really clear about the meaning of the words and the intention that we're trying to convey, because what we intend to convey is often way off the mark from what is received and interpreted by the person who's listening. So that's what was striking me this morning.
And what in that, can you tell us more about what the turning point was for this thought? And is this an audio or something that was on my website?
Are you talking about your lecture that I heard?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have it on my iPad, so it's something I downloaded from your website somewhere.
Okay. Well, maybe you could send me a copy of it. I'd like to listen to it. With it striking you that strongly, I'd like to give it a review, because it's been a while since I've looked at that material.
Yeah. Do you remember when you were reading the story?
Yeah.
Okay. I just can't remember how long ago it was. I think it's about 3 years ago now, but
it's probably 3 or 4 years since I did that. I did that particular piece 2 or 3 times in a period of a couple of months. So it'd be one of those. But yeah, if you could send me a copy of it, I'd love to give it a listen and see what listens myself with new brain cells to how it impacted you. And
well,
that's always useful.
In the context of the lecture, you were highlighting the importance of learning what Yeshua might have been talking about through brain cells that were similar to Yeshua's, rather than the Greek and the Latin and the medieval interpretations.
Right.
And so you were saying, if one word misinterpreted could cause an atomic bomb to be dropped, and this is, in the lecture you said probably one of the only things that's even more horrific than this is how Yeshua's teachings have been robbed from us because of the change of the meaning of the word forgiveness.
That's actually going to be the topic of our presentation tonight on Aramaicism. So hopefully the video will turn out and we'll have a new video in our repertoire.
Wonderful. Well, and I was just thinking of that in terms of our conversation today for parenting and teaching, and how much, there's a story about this literally happened to a friend of mine. She was spending the first considerable amount of time with her mother-in-law and her daughter. And she was a young mother. The daughter was maybe very precocious and 4 years old. And the daughter came in when the mother and her mother-in-law were in the kitchen working. And the daughter said, "Mommy, what does pregnant mean?" And the mother, feeling like she was really on on center stage with the spotlight on her in front of her mother-in-law to demonstrate good parenting, she launched into this well-rehearsed description of the birds and the bees and the man and the woman, and when they love each other, and if they do this special thing, then a baby is born and all that good stuff. And with perspiration dripping from her brow, she got through it, and the little girl said, "Oh, okay," and pranced off into the other room. 45 minutes later, as they were getting ready for the dinner, and she went in to call the people from the living room into the dining room, there's a big screen TV, and the little girl goes up to the TV, and she goes, "Look, Mommy, it's Pregnant Bush." So it's so important to not just assume that we know what our children are meaning or asking, or what the meaning is behind the word, and we ask them and we take the time to listen. I think you posted something on Facebook recently that if we just spent 10 minutes a day listening intently to our children, at the end of the month we'd have an entirely different relationship with our child. So
yes.
that's my offering for today.
Cool. Well, and for those who might be wondering, the term was mokusatsu, where the newspapers basically interpreted a word that meant we're waiting for the official paperwork. That's what they decided to do, was to wait until they had the official declaration, and the newspapers interpreted as, bring it on, go ahead. We're not going to give. So this is from a website I'm just looking at, just to share it a little bit. It's in the past when I've done this piece, it's one that just brings such grief to the surface for me. So I'm looking at a website that is blog.rev.com, and this is a 4-part series in some of the most famous mistranslations in history. If not for these little slip-ups, our world would be much different today. Near the end of World War II, Japan was basically facing two options. One, they could dig in and continue the war in the Pacific, or two, they could concede and end the campaign. The Allies, including the U.S., were tired of fighting and just wanted it over. Japan's premier had to make a decision. When Suzuki, who was the premier, took too long, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration. This declaration essentially said Japan needed to surrender or there would be prompt and utter destruction. Hounded by reporters, Suzuki held a press conference and told the Allies that the Potsdam Declaration was, quote, not worthy of comment. Shortly afterward, Hiroshima was leveled by an atomic bomb, then Nagasaki. So the article goes on to say, when Suzuki replied to reporters at the press conference, he used the word mokusatsu. This word means no comment, as he hadn't made a decision yet and didn't want to rush things. Unfortunately, it can also be interpreted as not worthy of comment. When the story ran in the international papers, this is what was printed. The U.S., thinking it was yet another example of the fighting wind spirit of Japan, made the decision to end the war with their secret weapon, the atomic bomb. This gives a different context to dropping the bomb. Faced with a long campaign in the Pacific, where they would lose countless more lives, the Allies opted to end it quickly. If Suzuki had chosen different words, or if the Japanese and English translators handled it with proper content, who knows what the war in the Pacific how it might have ended. No, it's pretty bizarre. On the turn of a phrase, it's powerful. So, and definitely as we're bringing those little minds into our culture and teaching them what our culture means, it's so important, the meaning of words and what we do with them. So thank you for bringing that forward. And again, I'd love to hear that audio just to kind of refresh it. So, in any event, Julie, how are you today, young lady?
I am fine. Good conversation.
Well, awesome.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, it's very powerful when you look at something as simple as one word, and it cost, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands died and continue to die from the dropping of that bomb. So all over a mistranslation. So you were starting at the end of our last 2 weeks ago Monday to enter into a conversation about getting children used to a routine and what the rules are, how things work. And would you like to open the space to continue that conversation?
Well, I was talking about the rules in the classroom and things like that, but what I had some confusion about, which was I've heard a lot of people use the term boundaries, and my parents never used the term boundaries, so I actually don't have too much brain cells for it other than the boundaries of where our yard was. That's how boundaries was used. But in lots of counseling and coaching situations, I hear people use the word boundaries. So I decided to look up the word boundaries, and I read it last time, so I'll read it this time. And it says boundaries, that which limits, keeps in restrains, limit, set bounds to ambition, to confine. And then I was talking more about rules, because I did have rules. We did have rules in our house, and I did have rules in school. And the word rule means standard or guide for action, to govern, to exercise authority or domain over, to control conduct, guide, to keep straight, sway, an established principle, standard or guide for action. And I was hearing Suzanne use boundaries. I've heard Tim use the word boundaries. But for me, it doesn't, I feel like if I'm, I'm just, someone else learning this whole thing, and I have a little confusion about where boundaries fits in this whole, healing process and supporting children, being happy people. So I'd like some clarification, maybe from Tim or even from you.
Dr. Tim, would you like to clarify your use of the word boundaries in this context?
Absolutely. I think the last time I said this, I went through this already. It bears repeating in my work quite often. When I talk to people about boundaries, I don't talk about fence and yard markers. I say that my boundaries are established by everything I say and do that educates the people around me about what I think is acceptable and not acceptable. And people, when I start talking to them about that, they get all excited and say, wait, you mean I can train people about what I think is acceptable and not acceptable? That's great. And they start thinking about different things they can do to send certain messages. And then I tell them that the part they really don't like to hear, which is that everything I say and do educates people around me about what I think is acceptable and not acceptable. So it's not something I can just selectively use. In this situation, I'm going to set a firm boundary by making this statement or doing this action. It's that all day, every day, everything I do is a part of educating people about what I think is acceptable and not acceptable. So it doesn't matter how many times I lecture my kids about how honesty is the best policy, and when you're lying, you're going to get in trouble. When the phone rings and my children answer the phone and they say, "Oh, it's the the gas company," and I say, "Tell them I'm not here," that behavior tells my children I think lying is acceptable. So in the process of trying to help people understand boundaries, I talk about several different examples. If I'm at a party and someone uses profanity or tells an off-color joke in mixed company or is making fun of someone who's less fortunate, and I'm in a group of people where that's happening, and I just stand there and chuckle mildly, but inwardly I'm thinking, well, that was inappropriate, my behavior is saying that's perfectly fine. So boundaries, I create this effect on people around me by everything I say and do. Another example I use is quite often when I'm sitting with patients in my office, they'll come in and they'll get rather animated and they'll let out a swear word, and then they'll say, oh, sorry, Dr. Hayes. And if it's a boundary teaching moment, I'll ask them to look around and notice that there's not a single sign anywhere on any of the walls in the waiting room or my office that says no swearing's allowed. And then we discuss, well, so why did they feel the need to apologize for swearing? Because they clearly swear a lot in their daily lives. And the point is, they feel awkward swearing in front of me because I don't swear in front of them. I don't swear in the office setting. I use all kinds of energy to think about what I'm saying before I describe a story or an emotion, and I use other words. So it's my behaviors that have conveyed to them a sense of, some might call it propriety, or what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So that's why I talk about in terms of, so if we have somebody who's living in a situation where someone yells at them, or for instance, a romantic relationship, and somebody gets angry and swears at their partner, and the other partner says, you know, that's not acceptable. I don't like it when you swear at me. Don't ever do that again. And 2 weeks later, the person is swearing at them again, and they say, that's not acceptable. Don't ever do that again. You're really upsetting me. And 2 weeks later, they're swearing at him again. Well, the words are saying this behavior is not acceptable. But my behavior, if I stay, is telling the person it's perfectly okay. You can get away with swearing at me. So it's everything I say and everything I do that educates the people around me about what I think is acceptable and not acceptable. And I'll wrap up my comments with what I mentioned the last time from Guy Finley. The way he talks about it is he says, please don't use anything we're talking about in this work to leave yourself open to or to stay in an abusive situation or an abusive relationship. There's nothing in this work that says, if you're loving, you let people walk all over you. He says, if you're clear in your communication with someone about how you don't like this behavior, you don't want to be around somebody who's doing that behavior or saying those words, and if they refuse to honor your wishes in that relationship, then you are not responsible for what they put themselves through when you leave. So that's where I would begin the discussion on boundaries.
Well, that's a great definition of boundaries, Tim. That's the best one I've heard yet. And there's a part of me that would hear it as when I can't control, and I've seen people use the idea of boundaries as a way of controlling others. When I can't control another, then I can use boundaries as my whip to control them. And I think that's a possible misuse of the idea of boundaries. And certainly, you know, as we come together with different minds, different thoughts, different cultures, different backgrounds, if you put two people in a room long enough and often enough, then sooner or later they're going to step on each other's realities or step on each other's boundaries. I don't care who it is. I don't care how holier than thou they are. Sooner or later, two people in the same space long enough, often enough, are going to step on each other's realities. And I think that there are other options besides, because I can certainly see someone saying, oh, so now if I tell this person they better do this or better not do that, then I've got permission to leave. I can break my commitments to them. And, you know, I would interpret that as a misuse of the idea of boundaries, and that the commitment that's in the commitment that we propose to people is if something less than love comes up, I'll hold this in my heart and listen as we each learn to speak, experience, and be responsible for our own realities. I'm here. That's my commitment. So the idea of somebody easily interpreting, well, you know, at the slightest offense, now I can leave because Dr. Jim said it's okay, I can leave and I'm not responsible for what goes on in your mind, which of course I'm not responsible for what's going on in your mind, but it, I can see people being kind of footloose and fancy free with that one and using it as an excuse to break their commitments too. And I think a commitment is another boundary where we need to recognize that everybody's going to step on something sooner or later. And when they do we have a commitment to heal? Do we have the tools? Are we willing to move forward? And of course, everybody has the right to make the choice at whatever point they choose to make the choice that this relationship has gone too far out of what's acceptable to me. But I'd be concerned about the frivolous use of that boundary issue to give people permission to break their commitments. Does that make sense for you?
Yes, I certainly didn't have that in mind. I think that in the full discussion of boundaries and personal responsibility, the highlight is on being fully responsible for everything I say and do. And if I have made a commitment to someone, it's, you know, my responsibility at whatever level I can bring myself to do that, to live up to that commitment. Julie, your questions, your comments on my intro?
Well, I liked everything you said, but, you know, I bottom-lined it, and you're just saying it, what is acceptable and not acceptable. That's how you saw boundaries. I just kind of like, I don't like the word, so I have to be honest here. The word seems to set up, like, okay, if I said to you, you know, I really like to have a relationship with you, child, but here are the boundaries. It just has a vibe to it that doesn't exactly feel, you know, I'm going on my feeling, too. It doesn't feel right to me. So that's why I was questioning it. It has a feeling of creating a distance between me and someone else. And that's why, you know, again, I just, I wanted to hear what you had to say. And I have to say that my bias is that I just don't care for the word too much. So I want to be clear, you know, for the parents and things like that, I want to be clear that what this word means.
Okay, well, I think I don't really care for the meaning that you're taking from that word or the vibe of it either, because it's certainly anything that would keep me separated from somebody else is kind of antithetical to the building of intimacy in a relationship. The way I've come to understand it, though, is that if I am clear about what I believe in and taking full responsibility for how everything I say and do communicates to people about what I think is acceptable and not acceptable, that means I'm not dumping any of my reactions on them, then in my experience, it opens up the possibility of a much deeper level of intimacy and connectedness in a relationship. So I would support you in finding a different word that doesn't resonate that separation.
Right. Like, I agree with you. You know, I agree. I feel like, let's say I'm in a relationship with somebody and, you know, they trigger me, okay? And you know, I can feel that, you know, I'm definitely triggered. And I'm going, instead of staying in the space of love, I'm going into my fear and hostility, probably my hostility. And I want to protect myself. Well, I'm sensing that I'm going to feel that that person broke my boundaries because what happened was unacceptable because now I'm feeling something, you know. So I would think that I would tend to use that word as a way to protect myself. You have broken my boundaries, and therefore I'm going to go into the protection mode. So, so that's what resonates for me. So that's why I want more clarity.
Well, and Julie, in the context we were speaking about it with children, with it being parent-teacher talk, to recognize, and one of the things that you found was really useful with the children was that you let them know how the classroom worked. In the Aramaic, the idea of law is not the rule of a superior, and I think that this perhaps ties into that conversation about boundaries. Somewhat attempting, I've seen people use the idea of boundaries to control or, again, to separate, but when we look at the word law in the Aramaic, it isn't the rule of a superior. It isn't something that anybody demands of us. It's just an understanding of how the eternal forces of the universe operate. And when we understand how they operate, we realize that law happens. The example I like to use is the law of gravity. If somebody steps off a cliff, there's no punisher that says, you broke the law of gravity, therefore I'm going to break your bones at the bottom. And there's no, suspender of the law of gravity that says, oh, you want to fly an airplane? Okay, we'll suspend the law of gravity. The person who steps off the cliff at the bottom, his bones break. That's just the way it works. The law happens. The person who understands the law of gravity has the option of, in that understanding, designing a machine that works within the way the law of gravity happens, and they can fly a heavier than air machine. They don't violate the law of gravity. They fly by honoring the law of gravity and knowing how it works. And so I would see the classroom and the home with the child as a place to educate the child, to give the child the understanding of how these laws work, how the eternal forces operate, and that they operate not only in the physical realm, but the mental, emotional, and relationship too. Yeshua, I think, is the primo teacher of this principle when he says the first order of business in the human life and in human relationship is you've got to keep the condition of Rahma in your mind. It's a law that when your mind is connected to love, then your mind works on the level of a human mind. When we disconnect it from love, then it's not a human mind anymore. It doesn't work the way human minds work. And you look at so much of the world, and it's inhuman. It's inhumane, and it's inhuman because people not understanding the laws of living in that regard, the laws of how the mind works, just don't know how to honor that law, don't know how to bring it into expression in their lives. And then when I hear you talking about setting rules up for the children, that they know exactly how the space works so that there's no question. And of course, defining the words becomes an important part of that. Would you say a little bit about the idea of setting up the rules in a way that the children can really comprehend them and know precisely how the rules happen in the classroom?
I'd be glad to. I do not have a list of the rules that I used in the classroom at this particular point, but there were some rules that the school required. An example of that would be walking in the hallways. And so whenever, we had just very few rules, and what I noticed about the rules were that the fewer the better, because then we could, comprehend them more easily and then support them. And one of the things that I noticed too, if they weren't able to follow the rule, that didn't mean that I needed to change the rule. It just means they needed more understanding about the rule. One of the things too is consistency about the rules. And I also used, the target, which had the letters A, B, C, D, and E, and F in it. And I would say when they were following the rules, I would say, that they were on target. I was real careful about any labeling. And when they weren't following the rules, they were off target. So I kept the rules, very simple and basic, and supported them until they became part of their brain cells. Another rule might have been, to keep your hands and your feet to yourself, and we explained what that really meant, whether they were inside, they were in gym, whether they were eating lunch, whether they were outside. this was an important rule because children at that age and in the inner city situation would tend to want to fight. So we had to really work on that particular rule to get it in place. And I can remember talking about, them, setting this rule outside especially. And I remember this one child, he was always getting into a situation where he could not follow this rule. And then, he said, we were talking about, do you want that energy coming back at you? And he never wanted that energy coming back at him. And one day he was able to actually follow through with the rule and keep his hands and feet to himself rather than jump another child. And he came back and was just delighted that he came into the room and said, I'm on target. I followed this rule. So, again, I think the rules need to be simple, and they need to be explained and truly supported. When I have worked with parents, what they tend to do is they think the rule is not working, so they change the rule, and now we have another rule. Or they add a rule to over the other rule, and, they hope that that next rule is going to work. But they don't give it time enough to really, I say what I mean what I say, and I'm going to be consistent here. I'm going to really support this happening.
Well, I think that, the situation that you're describing is a situation where people's rules are arbitrary and they're not in harmony with the way the universe works. They're not in harmony with law. If you go back to the ancient scriptures, they said, well, men passed their rules in their legislatures, and it's your obligation to obey them as long as they're in harmony with law. If they're not in harmony with law, then it's your obligation to say no. Because if you choose to honor the way the eternal forces operate, then you have to honor them no matter what anybody wants to lord over you. And I think oftentimes the parent, not understanding how the universe operates, ends up, creating rules that are something that have not been taught through, do not come from an understanding of the way the universe operates, or teaching a child how to work constructively within the way the energy field operates. An example of that is, a parent says, well, you don't do this sort of behavior, and then when the child does it, instead of allowing the child to experience the result of violating that law, violating the way the universe operates, one that comes to mind is stealing. So, the universe operates in a way that it keeps track of energy, and when you steal, then as you sow, you reap. Something's going to be stolen from you. And the parent who has a child that gets caught stealing and knows the judge and steps in and doesn't hold the child accountable for what they've done, ends up setting the child up to think, oh, so this is how the universe operates. I get to steal and somebody takes care of it for me. So therefore, the law is that I get to steal as long as I can get somebody to cover. And, so the 5-year-old child who learns that, the 8-year-old, the 10-year-old, if that continues, by the time somebody gets to 18, 20, 30, trying to learn that rule, all of a sudden it's prison time. It becomes, it's like the interest on learning how the universe operates is elevated every year that a child grows, and the consequences or the results of violation become more dire all the time. And, allowing the child to experience what it is, the natural consequence of the breaking of the way the universe operates is, I think, one of the greatest gifts a parent can give the child, rather than thinking they have to protect the child. Another instance is, I personally think, in the way that I raised my children, was that parents are not for leaning on, they are for teaching children that leaning is unnecessary. And if a child can do something for themselves, then the child should be supported in doing it. And by supporting the child in doing what they can do, it strengthens, it empowers them. The parent who steps in and takes care of every detail for the child, that doesn't want to do this, that doesn't feel like doing that, again, it just enables weakness. And that lesson, the longer it takes to learn that lesson, the more difficult it is for the child to learn it.
Well,
I think your experience in the classroom.
Yeah, that was very positively stated. I wish I would have said all of that. One of the things I think the rules do need to be is stated positively. In other words, walking in, I would like you to walk in the hall rather than don't run. You've got to drop the don't in your vocabulary and say what you want to expect from the child. And as you say, you look at what you want to create in your classroom. So you talk about the expectations and what we are going to do. And then, and this is really important, is that we come together and we go over these rules, and I actually listen to what their feedback is about these rules, and can we come into agreement with these rules. It's not like that I just stand there and say, I'm imposing these rules on you. I say, these are the rules. Some of the rules are mine, and some of the rules for their classroom, some of the rules are for school. But we'll talk about them so that we understand why they are here. And you can give me your feedback, you can tell me about them, and I will tell you about them. And then let's come into some sort of agreement and understanding about these rules. So it becomes more of a joint effort. Like I said, one of the biggest things I had to learn in the classroom is how to cooperate with them, work together, rather than the old traditional way of me imposing upon them, here it is, and I want you to behave. I wanted to work with them so that I can actually, feel the support they can offer me and me offer them. It's a collaboration.
Well, I think that instance where you had your electricity off and couldn't get your car to the garage, and the person at the school who was supposed to put someone in your kindergarten classroom and forgot to do that, and you get in there, what time was it, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and the kids are just doing their work and carrying on. They've gone down for breakfast because you've supported them in having that internal locus of control rather than I am the authority, I tell you what to do, when to do, how to do, and when I say jump, you just say how high. I think that's a powerful example. Anything to share more about that?
Well, that was a very, very powerful example for me, too, because the children were totally responsible that day, and none of the teachers in the hallway, probably about 5 of them, could believe, because some of them had some of my children in kindergarten, and this was a first grade class. I did have behavior problems in the class. Not one child was off target. They totally handled their morning without any adults in the classroom. They were totally responsible. And to be honest with you, it was like a breath of fresh air for me, because I thought, yes, it actually happened without me there. Because there were times where they seemed to want me to be their police woman, for me to think out what was going on for them. And I said, no, I think you need to think this out. I think this is your responsibility. It's not mine. And I saw them actually be responsible. It was a hurrah. It was my day too, Michael.
Powerful, powerful. Well, I know that Suzanne had a family thing happening today, and she was going to tap into the show if she could. Let's just check and see if she happens to be there and if she has any input for us. Is Suzanne there, Michelle?
Actually, I think you just unmuted me, and this is Carrie.
Oh, hey there, young lady. How are you?
Hey, good. If you want to go back and check and see if Suzanne is there, go ahead. Or Susan? I don't know who it was.
Is Susan there's the 314 number, Michelle?
314?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't look like it. I thought.
Okay, well, unless she had a family thing happening. So.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see what Carrie's got to share with us. Hey, young lady, welcome.
Welcome, and thank you. I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I just called in to check in and say hello. However, in light of what you guys are talking about, I thought I'd share something I feel like I've been going through the last few months, and I think some of the people that are in my closest circle have as well. And I'll just say for myself, having opportunities with other people when maybe I would like to share that what's going on around us is our creation, and they haven't quite figured out how to understand that yet, and keep, disagreeing with me or pulling up another point, or it's just been interesting. Challenges of the last few months that have been at an interpersonal comprehension level have just taught me to keep going deeper into my heart and to say to myself, okay, I want to just walk away from this person. I know that that is one of my power person dynamics. If I feel uncomfortable speaking up in response to this person because they're so strong in their belief that it isn't what I'm saying it is. So how do I do this? And kind of this dance of just continuing going into the heart and saying, how can I speak up with love, in love, and not walk away from sharing the truth that I know. And it's been really amazing. And even though it sounds like a little sidetrack, I think it kind of does fit in with what you guys are talking about. Because, you know, instead of setting up arbitrary rules or setting up boundaries or whatever old systems we might call them, I guess I have just challenged myself or invited myself to just keep going into the heart no matter what discussion or what interaction is going on around me. And I think it's just been a real deepening process, and I'm very appreciative of it. And I think it's like the Rockma filter, you know. I mean, I install Rockma in Cuba every morning and every night. The first thing I do when I wake up and the last thing I do before I go to sleep. And to just keep, I really love everything Julie was saying and what each of you have said. I mean, it's been really a great insights into this whole topic. And I just from a adult human interaction level, to know whatever is going on in the world around me, to just keep coming back and speaking to that from a place of love has been really a cool deepening process.
Well, I hear what you're sharing as something that in the past was addressed as being the bad news and the good news, and that is that 100% of the time it comes back to me, that the response I'm feeling inside of me is mine and it's inside of me, and I'm the only one that can take responsibility for that and change it. So it's kind of like every time I have to go deeper and deeper inside to keep moving out the generational patterns of hostility or fear that poke their heads up and, of course, give us the excuse that it's all about somebody else while I'm the one that's feeling it.
Right. So it's good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your input. We're looking forward to receiving your books, hopefully today or tomorrow.
Yep.
We ran out of the last case really quickly. They just disappeared. And for those who might not know Carrie Ellis, she's written a book called The 21st Century Superhuman, Quantum Lifestyle. And so we're here in Asheville, and we'll be spreading your book around the Asheville community when it gets here. So we're delighted that we're getting so much wonderful feedback from it. It's fabulous.
That is great. I love it. I feel like it's amazing how deep just the journey of this book and everything surrounding it has taken me, and how it really feels like something that's a guidebook for these times. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you for sharing it. And just to share also really quickly, I just came back from a month in Peru, which was another very profound and deepening journey, and met some people there who actually remind me of the monks of Tibet. And I'm beginning to think from ancient cosmology, I'm reading that possibly some of the people who carried on tradition high in the Andes had a very similar teaching they were carrying on as the monks of Tibet, who basically understand how to go into a very deep level of prayer, of love and gratitude, and connect with universal creation. And it's been very profound. Peru is a beautiful country. It's a
I lost you. Dr. Tim, are you there?
I am
country
here.
like
We're here.
Peru.
Okay, we lost your voice. You cut out there, Carrie. We lost you.
Oh, am I still here? I mean, where did I stop?
We just lost you the last maybe 30 seconds or so.
Okay.
It sounds like it was quite a journey.
Was quite a journey and really powerful. And I don't want to go off on that, but just to say, I feel like the last few months have been just taking me deeper and deeper into commitment to knowing that the only thing that I really want to live for at this point is to share love on the planet, to share our capacity for that and our capacity to continue establishing a civilization based in that. So it's exciting.
Yay. That, and of course, and passing it on to the children so that they can carry on the tradition.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for your call. We appreciate you, and we'll look forward to being in touch.
You're so welcome. Okay. Love to all. Bye.
Blessings. Bye-bye.
So,
Dr. Kim, do you have any more to share with Julie?
Julie, what were you going to ask?
Oh, well, I was just going to say that one of the rules in the classroom, of my classroom, was to memorize the commitment and then to use it, to apply it. You know, it wasn't just a memorization type thing. Lots of times in school we learn something by just rote learning and we don't use it, and so therefore it does not have as much meaning. So when the children memorized the commitment, we used it. And when I saw them using it, I supported them by giving them verbal feedback, like, wow, I like the way you are listening. You are really being a good listener. And, you know, or if I saw them interacting in such a way that was following the commitment, you know, I would say something right at that point so that supported the whole thing happening. And there were, I think, during the time period when I had really focused on this commitment, there were like a lot of rioting happening in California. And I remember some of my students, we sat down and we talked about that, and they said they don't have a commitment on how to behave with one another. So they really got it on a different level. You know, they really understood that rioting wouldn't happen if they would have had a commitment on how to treat one another. So I just wanted to share that.
That's powerful, Julie. What a gift to give those kids and to give the world to establish that principle energetically in the world is just a fabulous contribution to the whole game. Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, I gave it to them on a T-shirt, and I bet you when they were in 5th and 6th grade, they were still wearing that T-shirt, and they would pick up their outer shirt and show me they had that little commitment T-shirt on.
Right. Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, it was really precious.
Yeah. So Dr. Kim?
Well, it's hard to add to all that good material. I would just want to support what Julie was saying and what Michael was saying. One of the things that one of my favorite parenting programs does is it encourages people to give their children lots and lots of choices and teach them that they're free to choose and they're creating their own consequences as they do. And if I let a child choose and then I take away the consequences of their choice, I've destroyed the learning opportunity. But if I hold a space of love for them and explain to them some options, rules, Julie likes the word rules better than boundaries. If I explain the rules, then I let the children choose their behavior and the natural consequences happen. And I can love and support them through their having a difficult time with the consequence that comes with what they've chosen. I don't have to be angry at them for what they've chosen. And to repeat, one of my favorite phrases is, when I'm dealing with my children, I always want to take it seriously. Whatever's going on between me and my child, I want to take it very seriously. And I never want to take it personally. And that allows me a whole different level of the space to step back and hold a space of love for them and to see them as intelligent, self-directed beings who have as much to teach me as I have to teach them. And one more quick thing that I really like, it might go along better with Julie's way of doing things than the boundaries issue, is to create a mission statement for the family that's based in using the last name of the family, and take the first, or take each individual letter in the family and find a positive, focused word that begins with that letter, and then create an acronym or a list of behaviors that this family is agreeing, this is how we want to treat people. So, my name is Hayes, so we might say, if you're a Hayes, you're helpful, and you're attentive, and you're, whatever I want to do for the Y. So then we end up with the children sitting around with the parents in front of dictionaries, searching for words that they like, brainstorming about positive words that could be attached to each letter of the last name, and then they vote on the ones that they've chosen, and they create the list, and then they put that list up in every room in the house, and they give the children as well as the parents permission to remind anybody if they're acting in a way that's different from what they agreed they would act. So it's a way to make another level of commitment specific to each individual family that the kids get to participate in.
That's powerful, Tim. One thing I'd like to get in before we close the show out, too, is one of the things when it comes to rules is that there's a brainwash in the culture that says, well, you don't have the right to impose your rules upon the children. You just have to let them make their own choices. And I say, as a parent, our obligation is to teach the children how the universe operates and what the rules are, how the energy system works. Because if a parent doesn't give the child those guidelines, you can bet the person that's out there brainwashing parents of just let the child make their own choices, they're right there working to take over those children's minds and to become the one to direct them. So I think it is an obligation of parents to really, truly be willing to step forward in the face of whatever the culture is doing, whether it's the secular culture, the educational culture, the religious culture, and if it's not in harmony with law, to be clear, crisp, right up front and straight on with the kids of, son, daughter, that's not acceptable. And here's why, here's how the system works, here's why it won't work. So it's not a rule that's imposed without understanding, but rather, because what that leads to is propitiation, which is doing the right things for the wrong reason. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. Yes, sir. Okay. So the opposite end of the spectrum is doing the right thing for the wrong reason. And if you get kids doing that, then you just created a whole mess in somebody's life. But really understanding how it works, why we're doing this, I think it's the obligation of the parent to do that.